This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman, and you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Get charged up for action that'll shock your system.
Tell me that's not cool.
An unstoppable superhero and his crew embark on impossible missions and will bring mutated villains to justice.
When Static's in the house, bad guys better step off.
Pull the plug on crime with the adventures of Static Shock. Yeah!
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 184 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me, my good friend, good brother, and the man that runs our Twitter account. That's right, it's Liam. Liam, we are in a new month. Well, we're in the same month that we were last week, but we're changing series. We did something that we hadn't done, we typically don't do. We usually change series at the first of the month, but because of our extended two-part extravaganza last week with Batman The Long Halloween, we decided to push our new series to week 2 of the month, but excited to kick off a new series this week for episode 184.
That is right, and as we have been teasing on Twitter and Instagram all week, we are, of course, back in the sunny skies of Dakota, and we have another episode of Static Shock to talk about this week with a early season 1 episode, Grounded.
That is right, and it's a unique one, as we'll discuss when we get into the plot here. Well, it sets itself apart in one specific way, I guess. We can talk about that. We get to our 4 categories today, Liam, but before then, let's get our official Imdb synopsis for this week's episode, which of course you said did air actually back on the Kids WB. Listen to this. October 14th, 2000, meaning, Liam, this thing is old enough to buy alcohol in all states.
Yeah, how about that? That's once we start passing these milestones for when even Static is this far in the past, it's that's just another sign that we're old. And that, as you mentioned, will bring us to our IMDb synopsis for Grounded, which was written by Len Yuli, directed by James Tucker, never heard of him. Music by Derek Thornton, and animation by 2 studios, Slightly Offbeat Productions and Top Draw Animation. And that synopsis reads as such. Static encounters a giant worm-like organism that was created by the Big Bang, which somehow works its way inside Virgil's school after hours and endangers many students, including Richie and Frieda.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Yeah.
Which somehow begins to terrorize a couple of Static's friends. Yeah. Oh boy. Well, I mean, it does cover some of the meat of the episode here. And as I alluded, Liam, I think what tends to set this episode apart, while the formula throughout most of the series seemed to be that which was later, I don't know, I guess this was going on congruently around the same time that Smallville debuted. And so there was a formula for these shows, and where you have the baddie of the week is a new teenage character, typically, or somebody that goes to Static school, or somebody that's introduced, and then it's revealed that they're actually a bang baby, and then that bang baby ends up battling Static, and then we move on, and then the next week we kind of repeat this formula. And it was very similar with how things were with Smallville. You had your kryptonite induced freak of the week, right? So it was a formula. It worked. It keeps the entertainment moving and allows you to introduce all these different metahumans to interact, or in Static's world, bang babies to interact with him and with various different powers. And, allows you to use, not only use some of Milestone's original characters themselves, but create new people as well. So this week, I feel like sets itself apart because we don't actually have a human being as the bang baby. It's literally dirt. Or bacteria, I guess.
Yeah, he fights an amoeba, which goes back to our synopsis calling it a worm. I don't think it's not a worm at all. It's quite literally an amoeba. And yeah, it's And that's the thing. It's like there isn't really a lot of the other thing I think that is a hallmark of these, especially the earlier Static episodes, is that there's usually like a lesson that we learn by the end of the episode. There's no lesson in this episode.
Time doesn't pay.
But like, if you're,
really.
It's like, well, don't unleash a toxic power giving gas on the city because it might get in some dirt and a giant germ will.
Hey,
appear.
if you're gonna be an amoeba, you better be a good amoeba, and you better not be trying to eat people, because if you are, Static's going to stop you, or the long arm of the law will eventually catch up to you, or something. Yeah. There's no warm and fuzzy. This isn't a very special episode of Static. It's Static fights what could easily be Flubber, or a stand-in for Flubber, or Chemo, the Legion of Superheroes villain. It has this sort of power that, and we'll get into the actual plot here, is we start out as we have Static actually introduce battling who I thought would have been a far more interesting villain, and that is this armadillo looking chap who is bouncing around and just awfully hungry. And Static is sort of foiling his plans to steal food from restaurants. Dude just wants a snack, like he's just hungry. But Static chases him to this construction site, and that's where, as they're battling in this dirt.
What's the matter, Static? Shell shocked?
What's that? An earthquake? Okay, not an earthquake.
It burns!
Sorry, Blobby. No shell food for you. This is one fun city.
Which is disturbed by them fighting. All of a sudden, the amoeba raises up and begins attacking both of them in the midst of it. And Static sort of then spends the rest of the episode trying to chase down where the amoeba is. And we get sort of this weird subplot that I feel like, I'm not sure, we've talked a lot about, especially now that we're back here in Dakota and talking about these. A lot of times the writers used these as a platform to talk about bigger issues and a lot of things. This one was interesting because there is this sort of subplot with Frieda and the small group that are, complaining about the journalism class and the school newspaper funding getting cut.
You okay, Frieda?
No, didn't you hear? The school board just cut the journalism budget by 40%.
Oh, that's a lot of pencils.
Yeah, but meanwhile, have they cut one single dime out of the athletic department's budget?
No.
No, and you know the part that really ticks me off? Mr. Chesterton, our faculty advisor, I wrote this great editorial about the cutbacks, but he won't publish it.
Why?
Something about a libel suit and losing his job and stuff, but that's not the point. Whatever happened to freedom of speech? We have to take action.
That's right, girl. Power to the people.
Yeah, we'll chain ourselves to our lockers.
We'll go on strike.
Yeah, strike, 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 strike.
Virgil, you're a genius.
So in some small way, I think James Tucker did sneak something in there that, the importance of not only, obviously collegiate at a giant level, but even in some cities and states, the high school football being the main, high school football, high school baseball, high school athletics being the main focus and driver, while there's still should be an encouragement for some of these smaller things that don't necessarily drive revenue. So there's a little bit of a commentary there, I feel like, about some stuff, but it's not really, it's not really overt, and it's definitely the B plot to the whole episode.
Yeah, we get some comedy from that. Like the main episode is, we get her sort of complaining about her plight with the school, and then we have Virgil and Richie sort of trying to they're after Static has another fight with one. He's able to kind of capture a little piece of it that had broken off, and then he and Richie make this plan that they're gonna sneak into the school after dark to try to run some tests on it and try to figure out what's going on with it. At the same time, they bump into Frieda and her friends who are planning to release an unauthorized version of the school paper, kind of taking a shot at the school, and they're also sort of running afoul of this. It's like straight out of Scooby-Doo janitor.
Yeah,
like. Which is that maybe that's like where this should have been, is that because to jump a little bit ahead, the end result is Static defeats the amoeba by throwing like the janitor's cleaning solution on them.
Yeah.
So maybe it should have been like their school budget cuts and the janitor's going to get fired, but then he saves the day with his cleaning supplies. And so they decide not to fire him or something. Like maybe that's...
Yeah. And it's ironic that you said that about Scooby-Doo, because the whole time, honestly, I thought there was going to be a big reveal that the janitor was secretly the amoeba, like that he was turning into the amoeba or something, because every time he shows up, Static and Richie bump into him several times in the hallways, and he's mopping up, and there's this green, like, what appears to be pieces of the amoeba there on the floor. And then they go back late at night to try and break into the high school to use their equipment to study the piece of this amoeba. And he's still there. And then suddenly there's an attack on the football field by the amoeba. So I was expecting we were going to get a reveal.Maybe it was going to be one of Frieda's friends that was revealed to be, sort of exacting revenge on the athletic team because their funding wasn't cut or something like that. Like those are the things that you would suspect to be from the formula. But in a way, I was kind of pleasantly surprised that it was just an amoeba. Like there wasn't a big reveal of, it's actually this revenge plot, because I feel like that would have been the janitor just happened to be the reveal because he's the person you'd least suspect or whatever. But in reality, it was a lot less like Scooby-Doo than I expected it to be. Like it felt a lot like Scooby-Doo, but it ended up in the result not being a Scooby-Doo episode at all.
Yeah, no, it's like we said, it's pretty straight up. Virgil and Richie are sneaking around. They're trying to do studies on this thing. It sort of leaps out and it kind of attaches to their face shields at one point, and then they're able to kind of cut off a little sliver, and they examine it a little bit closer. And in the meantime, the larger piece is able to kind of break free and escape into the ventilation system. And so Virgil goes in after it and then gets lost, and then ends up running afoul of some insects, which, I mean, that high school needs to call an exterminator. There was like 1,000 cockroaches in that. Like, well, that was
I thought there was going to be sort of, I expected a subplot at that point that the amoeba was going to combine with the cockroaches. Now we're going to have like cockroach amoeba hybrid things, but that didn't, it was just a thing. It's just a funny little comedy bit.
What's also interesting is because there's the reason that the amoeba follows them to the school is like we said, Static captures this little piece of it and he shows it to Richie, and then they go and get on a bus to follow it. And then the amoeba was like trying to get to them, and then the bus pulls away. So it can like sense its other, but then later it can just split itself apart like willy-nilly. So I guess it's fine if they split up on purpose, but it didn't like when like a little piece of it just got left behind, like,
right.
But they make a point of saying that this thing does not have any sentience and that it wasn't, that it wasn't a person. I guess that's how they were gonna, melt it with with cleaning solution at the end, so you couldn't say that it was a person or had any kind of sentience to it. But yeah, that's kind of our finale, is all the kids are sort of trapped in different areas of the school, and then the amoeba kind of splits off and goes after all of the different ones, and Static is finally able to suit up and save all the other kids, and then goes and with the help, as we mentioned, of the janitor's cleaning solution, is able to take down the take down the bad guys. I mean,
It's running away.
No, just looking for more food. And the whole city's on its menu.
What are you gonna do?
Spoil its appetite. Yo, Goofy! You still got the munchies? Well, here I am. Come and get your grub on. Lemony fresh scent, too.
the only other notes they have are at the end there's a reporter interviewing them. And keep in mind, there was a giant amoeba that attacked the school minutes ago. And this reporter's first question is, what were you guys doing in school after dark? What a narc.
Yeah.
That guy sucks.
Yeah, he sucks a lot. Yeah. At the very come on, man. You're really burying the lead here. Come on. What's going on?
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit there.
Yeah, so I guess we can get into our scores here. We need not dwell too much on this. It's a fun episode, honestly. Like I said, I think based on knowing how this series tended to handle in with the benefit of hindsight, which we tend to do, and it's a benefit that we have of reviewing these 20-plus-year-old cartoons. You know, the formulaic way that the rest of the season tended to go. Having these individuals be the recipients of the Bang Baby power, and Static having to figure out, and a lot of times, like you said, having a lesson learned at the end. This felt just like a straight up, all right, well, there's a bad guy, and Static just kind of has to figure out how he's going to defeat it, and he doesn't really figure out how he's going to defeat it until that very final scene, well, the next to last scene, where he has this interaction with the cleaning fluid and realizes that it affects the amoeba in a negative way. So, I love that Static was able to kind of use some detective skills, figure that out. There's a little bit of comedy along the way with the interaction with them in the lab. The weird subplot of the school newspaper being canceled. It felt very, it's a little kitty, but that's okay. That's what these cartoons were for. So I actually, because it breaks norm from what Static did, I think I appreciated the story a little bit better. And because it, in a way, subverted my expectations of there being this big reveal as to who is behind the amoeba and there not being, I actually liked it more. So I ended up giving Plot a 7 out of 10.
Nice. Yeah, I went 6 out of 10. So not too much difference there. Yeah, for as simplistic as it is, it moves at a clip. It's fun, and I actually think a lot of the comedy in this episode, like Frieda's friends, are like the biggest bunch of like doofus cowards you've ever met. Like the second that they think they've been found out, they're immediately all pointing the finger at Frieda to say that it was all her idea, and then they're like. Just like there's like a lot of like weird slapstick in this episode too, with like Virgil crawling around in the vent, and then you see Richie trying to radio him, and you cut back and Virgil's like halfway down, like trapped in a vent, and then crashes out of the vent into the room where Frieda and her friends are, and has to make up an excuse. Like there's a lot of, I think, good comedy, and we'll maybe get into a little bit more of that in voice acting. But there's for forever it's worth, it's not the most memorable episode, but it's still a good bit of fun, which is what all of these cartoons should be.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. All right, Liam, let's move to our second category of the day, which of course is going to be visuals and animation. So I know you mentioned there's a pair of animation studios that were responsible for this week. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on this, and I definitely have some things to share.
Yeah, so as mentioned, this was directed by James Tucker and animation by Slightly Offbeat Productions and Top Draw Animation. It's interesting because I feel like there was maybe one other episode of Static that I can't remember off the top of my head that had some kind of weird off-model stuff, and I remember remarking how weird that is, because this side of like Superman the animated series, New Batman Adventures, and I know this isn't the exact normal stock DCAU style, but I didn't necessarily think of these era of cartoons of having issues being on or off model. And like there's some real weird like perspective issues, I think, especially with Static in this episode, with like his head being too big, and there's just it just like even like in his face didn't quite look normal to how it looked. Even this is episode 4, and I don't know quite where it is in the production order, but this was the fourth episode to air. And I mean, even comparing it to the first episode, even in this sort of season 1 style, the earliest attempts at doing this show, it still looked off model even from that. Like I think we've done enough of these early episodes now that I have a pretty good gauge for what is on or not on model for even these earlier seasons. And there's just some real weird perspective stuff, and Static kind of looks like a weird like doe-eyed Disney character in certain scenes too. So not all of it's bad.
It's funny that you say that, because I feel like the animation at points moves very stylistically like a Disney animated film, like the way the characters kind of it's hard to put it, explain it into words, but they almost move at like 1.5 times speed in a way. It's very smooth. It's a very quick movements, and hair flips in certain ways. And, to imagine if you were watching, for me, like the inspiration that I thought was like where my head went right to is like the scene in Beauty and the Beast where Belle is like swooping around the library. I haven't seen that movie in like, I don't know, probably 20 years, but like in my mind, the way that character moves, like very, very, pun intended, animated with their limbs, and their hair just sort of flips and flies in certain ways. There's a scene towards the end where Frieda falls into this laundry basket, and the movement was very like stylized after it. Like it just struck me as like, man, that looked like a Disney movie in a weird way. It's just a very specific type of animation that they use in the way that the characters tend to flow and move. And that specific scene did, but I right on. I think that the perspective issues, there were characters that felt elongated at times, like they'd lean into into the camera and their body would almost stretch, or they'd lean away from it and their body would stretch backwards, but their legs would kind of stay in the same place. Very odd perspective choices at times for the animation there.
Yeah, and that's not to say there aren't some fun moments in as far as the animation goes. I think that initial battle out in the open where the amoeba is like, I guess, eating all of the raw meat from like a meat packing plant, and Static goes there. I think there's kind of a fun beat there where Static's kind of figuring out what affects the creature and what doesn't, and then he at one point he sort of picks up a truck with his electric mag powers and hurls it at it, and it kind of bursts through the thing and kind of goes in one side and out the other. So I think there's some fun action beats there. There's a point where the amoeba is kind of following Virgil and Richie, and as it's going, it's kind of doing the Bugs Bunny like burrow, and you see the ground kind of breaking up as it's sort of following them underground, and then it slithering in and out of the vents and the sewer grates and stuff like that. There's definitely some pretty good fluid animation, I think, from the creature's perspective.
Yeah, I would agree too. I think it's cool. Also, I was trying to think of another translucent character. Like we have characters that are supposed to be invisible that you can kind of see that turn they represent their invisibility by just being see-through, like completely transparent almost on the screen. But like the translucent nature of this character where you can kind of see through it and some of the backgrounds through it as it moves in the city and as Static is fighting it, but it itself moves. It moves very fluidly. Like it moves like you would think that a gelatinous monster would move. So the animation studio did a good job of doing that. Unfortunately, I feel like they applied some of those same things to the way that the other characters moved. And definitely, I think you're spot on with as far as it being a fun character that you can kind of just we've talked about it before, whether it's Clayface or Ink or the elongated man, 3D or 2D man, some of these characters that you don't really have to follow the normal physics for, that you can kind of allow them to move as if they were, a stretchy guy, you might say. So I think that there's a lot more fun to be had in a cartoon when you're able to kind of throw away those normal rules of physics and allow the character to bend and move and swirl and kind of move the way that this character does, which made it feel, kind of like Flubber, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I think that sequence, it's almost like, and they don't really play it up as like this horrific, scary monster at all. But I think that bit at the end where Frieda ends up in like a locker room or whatever, the laundry room, and you see it like slowly, you see the shower heads all kind of shaking for a moment before it starts kind of oozing out of it. That felt like something that could, that could be in like a horror movie or something like that. So, and then it's, drops down to the puddle and sort of, stands up tall. And yeah, I think there's some really fun stuff in there, and they kind of mix it. And yeah, and like we said, there's some kind of goofy slapstick where like the two male friends that Frieda has, which I think they say their names, but one of them saying
Leon and Omar. Leon
Omar. Is the other one. Okay, so yeah, Leon and Omar. It's like they're like running around all scared and bumping into each other. Like there's some good, like as I said, some good slapstick.
Some Scooby-Doo. There's a lot of Scooby-Doo in that moment too,
for sure. And when the janitor takes off running after the tiny amoeba, only to, when he seems to have it cornered, the big one bursts out and he yells and runs away. Like, yeah, you might as well have had the spinning legs and the
right
and the xylophone or whatever there. But yeah, there's some very wacky and fun like slapstick stuff in here. So like I said, definitely some inconsistencies and nothing spectacular, but still some fun stuff. And I settled on another 6 out of 10 for my visual score.
That's great. I went just a tick lower just because of the inconsistencies and because of the issues with some of the characters. Like I said, I think that they did a great job in applying that sort of method to the amoeba itself, but unfortunately applying it to the rest of the characters and some of the perspective issues, being off model, and just some of the ways that the characters, their bodies were a little bit too long. Like there were periods where it felt like they were a little bit warbly, and it's hard to know which scenes were done by which animation studio here. But it's interesting that both of these animation studios tended to work together on the same episodes according to the DCAU wiki. So it's unfortunately there were some great things and some fun things, but there's also a lot that left something to be desired. So reflected in our scores. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. And other than theme song, and of course when Static does his transformation, music kind of took a back seat this week, which for me, if you've listened to any of our other Static episode reviews, is not necessarily a bad thing in my opinion.
Yeah, not much to write home about here. I think I feel like we got a little bit more during that initial fight scene when they're fighting at the meatpacking plant. I think there's a little bit more. Or maybe this is always there and I'm just now noticing it, but it's I feel like there's a little bit more electric guitar mixed into the Static fight music that we hear kind of in every the here we go music.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a little bit more. Maybe I just noticed the guitar a little bit more, but yeah, other than that, I didn't have much in the way of musical notes, so to speak. I think there's nothing wrong with it, but nothing that really stood out other than maybe a little more guitar than usual.
Yeah. I think it's the fight music is always good. The fight music between him and the amoeba, especially when he's calling it out at the end, and they're, Static and Frieda have this conversation where Frieda is worried, the amoeba's getting away, and Static kind of declares that it's headed towards the rest of the city to devour. And, the music kicks in again. And as he's calling it out, and it kind of turns back, and you kind of hear the Static theme raise up. Always love having a hero theme. So, with my scores because of the way that I tend to feel about some of the choices that they made in other episodes where the music tends to be very distracting for me. That tends to be in favor when I don't notice the music as much in an episode of Static. So I went with a score of 6 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I'm just a tick lower here at a 5 out of 10. Yeah, nothing to write home about. I think the action music is still good and still kind of adds a little bit of a oomph to those fight scenes, but nothing spectacular to write home about here.
All right, let's move to our final category of the day, Liam, which is going to be voice acting. We have no main villain voice actor this week because an amoeba doesn't talk, we learned. But we do have quite the list of other characters here, including several what I would categorize as 48-year-old men pretending to be 16-year-old or 15-year-olds in Static's high school. But let's get into this week's voice acting, shall we?
That's right. So first and foremost, playing the role of as you mentioned, the armadillo bang baby that we see at the start of the episode, whose name, for the record, is Carmen Dillo.
Carmen Dillo, which actually inspired me as he was going to the restaurant. I was like, what if Carmen Dillo went to get shawarma? Man, if I was to create a shawarma restaurant, I would name it Shawarmadillo. If that doesn't exist already, trademark, copyright. CR.
Love it. I love it. So we have
shawarma. I apologize to everybody who has not turned off this episode already. Beautiful.
Man. We got time to riff. It's fine. We have Matt Ballard playing Mr. Dillo, who folks might know from he's done a lot of voice acting over the years. Also had some minor roles in things like Role Models and a few other kind of comedies, Wet Hot American Summer as well. So a few kind of cult classic comedies under his belt as well. But we don't get much of him. But I just enjoy that character. I'd like to see quite a bit more of him.
Yeah, but, is he in any other episodes?
I know he appears at and this is maybe a little bit of a spoiler for something we'll cover later in this month. He along with some other former Metabreed or Metahuman members, I believe, appear in the Justice League crossover episode. I think the start of that episode is Hawkgirl and somebody helping Static fight them off, but we will perhaps talk about that on another date. But elsewhere in the cast, I should say, we have Karen Murayama, I should say, as Kim, sort of one of the other people in Frieda's crew, along with Richard Tatum as Omar and Jonathan Floyd as Leon. And as you mentioned, none of them really sound like kids, but they're all pretty funny, and like they all just have like 2 or 3 lines, but they're just, like I said, they're just like these dopey cowards who are running around doing this silly stuff. And I think it's a pretty fun little supporting cast. A lot of talented veteran voice actors in there. We do have Steve Franken voicing the janitor, Mr. Janus, who folks might know he was actually in the original the 1970s Westworld, as well as several other movies and television shows. He was in Angels and Demons, the Tom Hanks film, and a few other things as well. Again, as we have talked about already, straight out of Scooby-Doo, and the voice performance was no difference. I do wonder, now that you've put that seed in my head, maybe that was meant to be kind of a red herring, that like we have this angry, grumpy old janitor. Maybe we were supposed to think he was a bad guy secretly or something, but
maybe we should ask friend of the show. We can ask friend of the show, James Tucker, Twitter friend of the show, James Tucker, if he has any memories about that.
I will. I'll have to check. We'll have to check in with him and see if he can give us any insight there. But and then elsewhere in our cast, other than our 2 main leads, we have Danica Mckellar as Frieda, who we've talked about quite a few times. She's done a lot of voice acting work, including currently she is the voice of Miss Martian on the Young Justice show, probably most famously to people of this show. But I will just mention we've already talked about the kind of the comedic subplot of the episode, but her line delivery in that first scene where she's so angry about this, and Virgil and Richie, and she tells Virgil and Richie that the guidance counselor tells her she can't print it or whatever, and they ask why, and she's like, and she just in the most, I thought it was so funny the way she just says something about a lawsuit and he would lose his job or something, and then just keeps ranting, like keeps filibustering. Like it's such, her delivery on that line is so darn funny. I rewound it like 3 times. It made me laugh so much.
Yeah, it's a good performance. She has a lot of fun. And it's funny because she's unaware that this is being played as the B plot comedy plot of the episode. So she takes it 100% seriously. The character does takes it 100% seriously and unironically in delivering all of the lines. And being demanding as they break into the school and trying to give out excuses as to why they're in the classroom and all that stuff. So yeah, there's lots of just a straight man response in the way that she delivers her lines, and it's good. Yeah, obviously she's still being employed today. 21 years later, Young Justice is still going strong here at 21 years after this episode debuted. So she's pretty good at what she does. So good performance this week as well.
Yeah, Frieda really falls by the wayside. I feel like once Daisy gets introduced to this show, like she's kind of yesterday's news. So yeah, it was kind of funny to see her get that much of a spotlight. But yes, other than that, of course, we do have our 2 main leads being Jason Marsden as Richie, who is mostly just there to make ham-fisted pop culture references. Pre-gear Richie is about 80% bad jokes and pop culture references, and then this episode certainly no exception. We do get, this is the origin of the shock vox, the little walkie-talkie.
Yeah.
So we do get that bit of static lore. And then but other than that, of course, we have the great Phil Lamar as Static. And like you said, because it's such a light and fluffy episode, I think there is a lot of chances for the whole cast here to sort of to work on their chops, and I think everybody does a pretty good job.
Yeah, it's a solid effort all the way around. I think that people are strong in what they do. Obviously, we talk about this every time we review Static, and especially with Batman the Animated Series having been the last official DCAU series that we covered in the prior month. It's hard, it's hard to compare sometimes the animation or the music or even sometimes the plots, because they're written for different audiences. They were different budgets. They were different. The Static season 1 wasn't even intended to be in the same universe, as we've discussed many times. But when it comes down to it, the most consistent thing that you notice is that for the most part, the majority of the time, the voice acting is the thing that stands out the most, and you usually get a good effort, especially out of the people that were series regulars. It's the series regulars are people that have continued to get jobs to this day and that have made a career out of being really amazing voice actors and actresses. So it's really great to be able to put on one of these episodes and not be weirdly distracted by subpar performances. That's one of the most consistent things I would say across all the DCAU shows. Ultimately, is that you ended up with a pretty good voice cast and a voice direction, coming from Andrea Romano. So works out well to make this feel somewhat in that same universe because of that. So because of that, I think all the performances are really strong. I ended up giving voice acting an 8 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I actually give it the exact same score here, an 8 out of 10. I think, like I said, it's just, even though this isn't like we said, this isn't a very special episode. There's no big emotional heart to heart from any of our characters here, but yeah, it's just fun all the way through, and everybody kind of gets a moment to be pretty funny, and it's a funny episode, and the voice acting is a big part of that.
Absolutely. All right, Liam. Well, that will bring us to our final scores for this week's episode. Tallying everything up, I ended up with a seems like a little bit lower than it should be, but I guess the visuals brought it down a little bit. But I ended up with a 26 out of 40. What about you?
Yeah, and I am right in that same ballpark, not too far down. I believe I am at a final score of 25 out of 40.
All right, so we're talking, as we always do, about rewatchability here, Liam. We mentioned there is the Shockfox's origin is told in this story here, but in the grand scheme of things, the amoeba doesn't return. We don't really advance the plot very much here as far as relationship-wise with Static or Static and Richie or Static and Frieda. It's just kind of a plug-and-play episode that we have here. I would say I would give probably a 1 thumb up for me, just because it does, as I mentioned, break the norm, and it's a fun 22-minute episode. But in the grand scheme of things, DCAU picture, nope, not relevant, doesn't make a long-term impact or dent. And then even within the Static lore, it doesn't move any of the plot forward because it's so kind of early on here in the series. So I guess like half a thumb up. Is that a thing? Can we do that? Half a thumb?
I love it. Yeah, I think I would pretty much agree with your assessment here. There's nothing too coincidental to the larger Static lore or the larger DCAU lore, but hey, it's fun. It's fun and it's funny. So
yeah, it's one of those things that you can put it on, and honestly, if you're an adult, you can get it. You'll get some of the references maybe, or some of the homages to those cartoons, those Hanna-Barbera Scooby-Doo cartoons, or some of those other cartoons from your childhood, and your child will probably enjoy it. It's 22 minutes of good fun, and who knows, you might get your kid to want to watch more Static after that. So I can definitely recommend that, especially if you're watching it on the fantastic HBO Max app. It's the best app. I love that app. Not a paid sponsorship.
Love it.
All right, Liam, let's wrap this baby up. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. That's right. We're on all of the big boys. So if you can, and you haven't done so already, subscribe to us. And if you are able to, leave a 5-star review for us. We would greatly appreciate that. Heck, if you can leave a little blurb and let us know what it is that you appreciate about the podcast, hey, that helps a lot too, because then that old algorithm starts seeing that and recognizing that and tells us, suggests it to other people. So we would greatly appreciate that. You can also, of course, always listen to us and subscribe to us on the Pod Tower on YouTube. Not only do you get content from us there, but also our friends at Tim Talk and the Watchtower Database. We would love you to go on there. Even if you don't listen to our podcast on there, go subscribe to that channel. Just search the Pod Tower on YouTube. That would help us out a lot. Of course, you can also support the podcast by using the link at the bottom of the episode, or you can go to our website, DCAUreview.com, where you can find our full archive of episodes and check out our store, get a shirt, hat, mug, sticker, something if you want to support the pod that way. Thank you so much for listening to this week. And of course, we're going to continue next week, Liam, with another review of Static. And let's talk about what episode that will be.
That's right. Next week, we will be going a little bit forward into season 2 of Static and talking about a couple of returning characters, that being not only Rubber Band Man, but Ebon as well. And maybe those guys have some sort of connection. And so we'll be talking about the episode Bad Stretch right here next Saturday.
Pair of our favorite characters, I think, that we've reviewed thus far. So excited to see those two guys together. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Adios.